This is Indie Attack once again with Woody.
And Cousin.
Today, as part of our interactive fiction competition review look at Dilema Bob, we are playing With Those We Love Alive by Propantine.
Yes.
And thankfully I recognize that name. Propantine, if it's the same Propantine that I am thinking of online handles, ran the site Free Indie Games for a couple of years, which I've actually pulled a bunch of stuff from.
Cool.
For Indie Attack in the past, and games I have played in general. So that actually made me interested in playing this,
Definitely.
and I'm really glad it did.
Me too.
This is a hard game to describe of what exactly this is.
Yes.
It is... It's an in media res kind of dark fantasy thing, where you do not get an explanation of the universe you're going into. You just start.
But it is a very descriptive...
Yes.
The universe is described very well within the game.
And there are a lot of things in this game that are indicative of like a dark fantasy, sci-fi-ish environment, but to the characters in the game don't really appear to be that. So it's this kind of weird contrast. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The game starts with you as a child person.
Yes.
Being taken... Well, you kind of do a little bit of a character creation thing. Kelson and I talked before this about how much that might actually affect what you're doing. We don't know how much that affects your name or what eventually happens in the game.
It seems like it's in certain intangibles, because who knows, like, little random experiences that we had along the way might have differed, you know?
Yeah, so we're not entirely sure.
Yeah.
You are taken to the palace of the Empress.
Yes.
Now, the Empress, you would think at first would be, you know, the queen or ruler of whatever is going on. The Empress is clearly not human. It's some kind of weird skeleton snake beetle monster.
Yeah, amorphous, but towering, horrifying
there
creature.
are notes mentioned about how she has aids, like washing her skull and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a very sort of Lovecraftian horror.
Exactly, very Lovecraftian and very grotesque.
Yes.
You know, specifically.
And you kind of get the sense from this that this is like a universe where maybe humanity is not doing that great.
Yeah.
And this sort of the Empress creature is not like a positive force. She might be subjugating humanity pretty harshly.
Along with the help of her handlers, who don't seem like good fellas at all.
Yes. But anyway, you were all kind of indoctrinated to this, so this is all our speculation and not exactly what the main character, who is you, technically, is talking about. But your character is brought to this Empress's court to be an artificer, to make things.
Yes.
And workshop to make works of art, or weapons, or pieces of technology.
Yes.
And the game kind of plays out from there of you will periodically get projects that you have to do for various festivals or ceremonies, but then you can also explore around the palace, you can explore around the city, the palace is inside and near. There's some gardens and stuff.
The city's very destitute, which goes along with the sort of tone of the game, and then you for whatever reason you were one who lives at the palace and has sort of a diplomatic immunity. And the character, from a character standpoint, it's like you're saying, it's not so much that they're like, oh, there used to be a happy Earth. It's like, this is the Earth that we
this
live
is
in.
the Earth they know. Because you hear things that they sound horrific to the people who are reading this game and playing this game. But to the character, it's just commonplace. To the character, it's commonplace to have, drink children's distilled dreams in some kind of liquor, which is a horrific experience for the children to go through.
Right, totally. And your character's dreams were messed with in your life.
Yeah,
right. It's very, there's kind of that City of the Lost Children.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different tonal vibes.
It's very evocative. And
it is.
The writing style of this game does so much to sort of drive home and make this interesting, because this could have been sort of a dry, this is what the world is like. It's a dark place. And there's so much kind of descriptive fantasy like that, as this is how the world is different from ours. And this is the only world that exists.
Yes.
Is the one in this game.
Exactly, and it's all relative to the player, so what's interesting is just that for instance, I think one thing that separates this from other games, it's not so much that it's like, oh, do you want to go left or right? And then the game will then tell you, oh, you went left and this happened. It's like, at one point, just the choice, it's like, you choose, you are selecting lay awake for a long time because you can't sleep in bed, you know, and there's something about putting the onus on the character to engage like that that's interesting than just the game like spilling out. It's like your character develops in a very, you really get that this is an existential person who's sort of accepted this like weird lot in life, and that life is not just great, fundamentally that life is not so great, and that's different than saying like, oh, I'm going to interact in this world and then the game will tell me what's happening. You're fully living that character's experience, and I don't know, it's really cool.
And there's eventually more hints of kind of like a central plot line to this that we're not really going to go into because it's kind of spoilerish territory.
This is a fairly fleshed out long game, you know.
Yeah, this is
45 minutes.
30, 45 minutes.
Yeah, you know, depending. Also, I think one element, the presentation is the other huge thing that distinguishes this in the genre, I think, because basically as as you go through the cycles of your day, not only will the music change based on what's happening,
the color of the game changes, the background,
the color palette, and as you sleep, the way new information comes along is cool based on like your sleep cycle, and then you'll wake up and sometimes there'll be a message pinned to your door, and like the texts will reflect sort of atmosphere and mood, you know, colors.
Now, I do think the game is very evocative of a certain mood, but that actually gets into what is kind of my main issue that I have with this game, is that you get to the palace, and you can explore the palace, and you can explore the city. These end up being good for the world building and what they're going for, but from a gameplay perspective, I don't really think they serve a whole lot of a point. Because I was kind of getting up every day and doing my standard visual novel thing of, I need to go check out every single area.
Right.
Well, for a very long time, those don't change. And they kind of rarely change doing that. You know, you can explore the city once or twice after a couple of major events, and there might be some minor changes, but otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing.
I would think that it would strengthen the experience a little bit, because I agree with you. I ended up like just scrolling through text, and then sort of the monotonous way.
Yeah, it's a little monotony, which I think fits with the game's narrative really well.
Yeah,
but from an actual playing perspective, it's a little
maybe just the places that change could pop up as an option, you know, or something like that.
Or maybe if you just had an option to explore the city and not go to specific locations in the city,
right?
And then when you explore, you get different results. Or maybe you just don't have the city at all, and maybe exploring the city is an event that you eventually do, and it's more fleshed out and a little bit more detailed.
Definitely. I think so.
It's overall a pretty minor complaint, and
yeah.
I had that complaint more when I started, and once I sort of got how the game flow worked, I didn't really have that problem anymore.
You can really force the plot progression through the sleeping really, you know, automatically.
Yes.
I want to highlight, we've talked already about the writing being super descriptive, but just as an example, at one point you have to choose a painting that is then affixed in the throne room for the Empress, and it's like majestic Atlas beetle horns, her mantle of anemone tendrils, her eyes drooling with soul sludge. This is the kind of like language we're dealing with here.
At one point, I believe I made a bow to hang in the throne room that was made of the bones of a rival tyrant in hate wood.
Yes, and mine was a blade of dream-dripped steel, you know. And they talk about these alchemical kind of things as if they were talking about like using glass and iron or something.
Yeah.
You know, it's
just a boring utilitarian object that just so happens to be like, you know, magical heretic spines.
Exactly, yeah. It's very evocative stuff of this greater universe that is a very seemingly
evocative,
crazy.
It's our word of the day.
Yeah, it really. Yes, we've said it a bunch. And so once you get to the sort of, you know, we don't have to discuss plot points per se, but.
And we don't necessarily know how much variance there is in the story, because we actually had that conversation before we were trying to figure out how much our plots diverge, and if they diverge, and I'm still not really sure how much they do diverge, because I don't know if we ended up picking up most of the same decisions.
It seems like to me at the critical, there's a critical point at the end where you decide kind of the fate of someone, and I think that letter that you write, I think that might have the most sway on like how the game ends. You know?
I also think there is some interpretation over the end of the gaming,
for
too,
sure,
of how things worked out at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it seems like the final sequence, there might be a couple of checks against stuff you've previously done that determine how that worked out. but I'm not sure because I think I would need to play it again to figure that out.
This is just based on each of us going through it one time, and we had sort of similar results. Yeah. It turned out, so then it made us kind of question the overall how that system works. But I do want to say that what I appreciated about this game, just from a thematic level, speaking broadly, there's a lot of. I mean, it's obviously dark elements, but it ultimately it's not just gibberish and for the sake of it. I think it does lend into. It's about dreams. And it's about, in the metaphoric sense, not just literally having dreams, but dreams, life, things like that, and about letting go, ultimately, memories, letting go of things, and the dead, and the past, and sort of it all kind of culminates in the end, and you can really interpret that how you will in the end, but, I don't know, it takes a wide road to get to make some of the comments but I ended up walking away feeling like it did have some statements and thoughts about life, tied through this guise of a really dark universe.
Yeah, this was a very interesting experience, and I don't think it's the kind of experience for everybody. You definitely have to be in the right mindset to get into this.
Very moody game.
Like we did, it's very moody, very dark. So I really strongly recommend checking it out, but it is kind of an out there experience.
Definitely, yeah. But as far as the competition,
it's also a really solid experience.
Really solid experience, and it might be my favorite so far.
I might agree with that. Yeah.
So I would definitely highly recommend